All right, I think it's recording. A little bit green to this, but welcome Nick Evans to Epic Rides Interviews. You are the first person I'm having on this interview series, and I'm very, very happy about that because you and I share a similar passion of cycling in France, particularly the Pyrenees. I've done a bunch of retreats there, and I kind of consider it my home away from home and think about it all the time. And currently we have the lockdown situation, which makes for traveling not so great. Um, and also I've just had a newborn, so I probably won't make it over for a couple years. But the next best thing is to talk about it with someone who knows quite a bit. And our guest today has written 2 books on cycling in the French countryside in 2 different areas. So welcome, Nick. Um,
Thank you very much for having me.
why don't you let us know about these books and the titles?
Okay, so there are actually 3 books,
Oh, I'm
um,
sorry.
but no, that's fine. The first one was very much an experiment in how to self-publish using it's Amazon, and it's just focuses on climbs around where I live. Within a 50-kilometer radius of my actual village. Um, and once I'd done that, and I didn't expect to get much interest, I didn't, the very small audience, the small area in which I live. Um, I then, with the process I'd gone through, I kind of replicated that, but on a bigger scale, and I moved on to do the Ariège, which is the département, which is a French kind of like state, if
Hmm.
you will, that is just south of where I live. Um, and it features climbs that are used in the Tour de France, climbs like the Plateau de Bay, climbs like Axe Trois Domaines, but there's a lot of little roads that you don't ever meet any other cyclists, you don't meet any other traffic, and you kind of feel like there's nobody knows they're there. And that was the purpose of the book, to kind of highlight some of these lesser known areas, as well as documenting the more popular
The
climbs that
classics,
people
sure.
like yourself, people who travel from abroad want to come and see.
I have enjoyed some of the classics, not in that area, and I really would like to get there. But what I've found is, whereas the classics are great, the hidden gems and the unknowns are just as good, if not better. So I
Mm.
think we're on the same page in terms of that, and it's great to expose people to a concept like that. So can you tell us the title of your 3 books, please?
Yeah, I've got them here. The first one was very simply just the 25 best cycling climbs around Mirepoix, which
Very cool.
is a medieval town that's just down the road from us. Um, and then the second one I did was cycling climbs of the Ariège.
That's the first one
And
I noticed.
yeah,
Or no, I noticed the one of the ode. Is that right?
and yeah, that's the one that I've done most recently, which was I think it came out in March or April this year,
Oh,
maybe a
okay.
bit later actually.
I
Yeah,
had it.
this
I
year.
had it mixed. I thought the other 2 were in the opposite order, but they're yeah, they're both very nice.
Yeah, I mean the Ariège one I did first because the Ariège is more of a climbing area.
Mhm.
It's just mountains. There's a little bit of flat in the north, but mostly it's the Pyrenees and then the foothills of the Pyrenees. Whereas the Ode was a bit different because there's a massive valley through the middle of the Ode
Uh-huh.
where there's no climbing at all. So it was different areas, and a lot of the climbs in that book are the kind of climbs that some cyclists would say, well, that's not really an epic climb. It's not a massive climb, and no, they're not. But they're beautiful roads that allow you to explore the countryside, and the fact that they're a climb gives them a kind of there's a start and a finish point rather than just this bit of road's quite nice. You know.
Yeah. Um, well, I mean, areas that have valleys and have flat options as well as climbs and hills and nice scenery. I think those are pretty ideal. There's kind of something for everyone there. The most recent trip I did, where I ended up in the Pyrenees, I was in Spain actually, although I was right on the border. So I was in Puigcerdà.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
we did a day trip to Andorra.
Mhm.
So Andorra, has both the Tour and the Vuelta going there, and tons of pros live there because of tax breaks and good altitude training
Yeah,
and good
of
climbs
course.
and whatnot. But you know, if you were to just go to Andorra and you like riding, you know, spin out the legs a bit in the flats in between climbs, you would not be satisfied at all. It's just
No.
it's a busy city, which very few people talk about how intense and in my opinion unappealing the main city is compared to
Yeah.
the countryside's fantastic, but you have to get through some tunnels, and I had a bit of a fiasco trying to get to Arcalise. I ended up being
Oh
in
yeah.
a tunnel on accident, and I was kind of sweating bullets, and my fiance was pregnant back in the car park, but not really into the city. I wish we would have driven just to one of the smaller towns further up, but it was really, really beautiful there. But the a place like Fucerta, which has a valley that you can do flat rides on small roads, or the main place I've been, which was right at the base of the Porta Balez. I did 4
Yeah.
yoga retreats there. That has a lot of valley riding. You can do foothills, or it's kind of on a roller coaster. You can do Porta Balez, which is one of the longest climbs in the Pyrenees,
Yeah.
and you can do all kinds of different climbs as well. But I really enjoyed being able to spin it out in the valley in between, the epic grinds. And the big main climb, the famous one near there that I rode a lot was the Purisord, and I like that climb quite a bit. But what the
See,
host,
I haven't actually done that yet. That's
I
about
mean,
the only major tour climb I haven't done.
oh really? Yeah, it's a good one. I really liked the first time I did it. I did it from the side near Aro. So I think that's the easier side, but I think it's more scenic. I really like that side. Both sides are good, but it's a pretty wide road and it's very straight. Like there's like 3 hairpins at the bottom and 3 hairpins at the top. So 6 hairpins, which is a lot more than the United States, which has straighter roads. But for Europe, that's pretty hairpin less. And the hosts where I stayed just referred to it as like a highway compared to a lot of these
Yeah.
other roads, and it's good for descending. But those small roads, for me, they just give you like this really special feeling, and especially if you're not from a country. I know in the UK they have those nice small little roads, but in the
Yeah,
States,
they do, but
you
they're
know,
not in the same way as here. Um, I mean, the best thing about riding in France compared to the UK is just the lack of traffic.
oh
Because
yeah,
you can ride for hours and hours and hours and see nothing at all. Whereas in the UK, there are some lovely roads, but you'd be very lucky to ever be able to enjoy them by yourself.
yeah. Now, how long have you been interested in road riding, and do you do various forms of cycling, or do you mostly stick to the road?
I mainly rode. I rode quite a bit when I was young. Just around and about where I lived. But then I really got back into it probably maybe 10 years ago, and I started riding to work. And then occasionally on the weekend I would go out. I just had a hybrid bike. It wasn't anything special. And then maybe about 7, 8 years ago, I got my first proper road bike, and I entered a couple of like sportives in the UK in County Durham where I used to live, and kind of just from there got bitten by the bug. Started uploading rides to Strava, got a Garmin, and then since then I've just done more and more riding every year, really.
Awesome. And do you have a favorite road that you've done, or maybe a couple favorites from your books in your areas or nearby areas?
I mean, there's so many. It depends a lot. I find on the mood you're in, what sort of riding you want to do, and what the weather is doing as well. Because there are some rides that are lovely if it's not windy or it's not wet or it's and there are some that you'd rather avoid, especially if the wind's going in the wrong direction, because it can get quite sort of blustery down here. But I think if I had to pick kind of a favourite, thinking of the Ariège, I'd probably say the Col d'Agnès,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's quite a major climb, quite a major Pyrenean climb, really. But I rode it, I think it was March, April time, and there was just nobody around. It has, like you talked about hairpins, it has hundreds of hairpins, or not hundreds, but 10, 20 hairpins, and you arrive at the top, and then there's just this beautiful view down over a little lake, and more hairpins going down the other side, and a little bit of snow on the peaks. It's just beautiful.
I've seen
And
the pictures. Yeah.
yeah,
It
and
looks
and you
like.
could, in fact, that's the cover of the Ariège book.
Oh,
The
is that right?
descent. Yeah.
The,
Um,
the cover of your other book has a beautiful picture on it too. Can we take a closer look at that real quick?
yeah. Um, that one, that was going to be actually, funnily enough, that was what I was going to say was my favourite climb in the Ode. It's.
I saw that picture and I wanted to do it. I was like, I want to do that road. That looks amazing.
It's a really strange one. I found it there's a website I use called Col Cyclisme, which just labels cols, cycling cols in France. It's a French website, and I found this climb. It was called Les Artigues d'Ormalo, which is what I've called it in the book. But I couldn't find anything about it in terms of anyone else had ever ridden it or any information about it. So I just went one day and tried it, and there was a point where the road forked, and I didn't know which way to go. I plotted a route on my Garmin, and I just followed the route. It wasn't clear which was the major road. They both looked pretty small, and it ended up being that the road had collapsed, had been washed away by a landslide.
Oh, there you go.
I had to go back down to the junction and then continued up, and that was the picture I took above once I'd gone past this landslide and gone above that point of the ride. And then you get to a small village, and then it kind of descends into a little tiny track that just hugs the mountainside. It's a bit gravelly, it hugs the mountainside, you've got beautiful views, and then you get to a cattle grid, and that's it. It just stops. There's just a big opening in the trees, and there's nothing grand about it. There's not even a sign to say where you are. I think there's a sign saying it's a forest area, and that's it. And you just turn around and go back. And some people, I've got a couple of people I talk to about cycling out here, and they say, I don't really like doing climbs where you just go up and come back down. But if you only use main roads, then you're never going to find the kind of beautiful scenery that climbs like that have to offer.
And also, I mean, if you're not, I can understand preferring loops or preferring passes, but if you're not open to doing a road like that, you're going to miss out on some wonderful roads.
And I mean,
plenty of backs here like that, and I love them, and I don't find the scenery to be the same when you going back down. Things look different. You have everything that you couldn't see behind you now is like panoramic, and vice versa. So I don't mind out and backs at all.
No, I mean, that's what I say in I think both the books is that they're great climbs because you can choose when to stop. You're going up and you decide, actually, it's started to rain, or it's getting late, or my legs are feeling a bit tired. Well, just turn around. It doesn't matter. You're not missing anything necessarily by not getting to the top. No one's going to know.
Well, if you're plugged into the data, people might.
Well, true, yeah.
But you don't have to upload that, or you don't have to tell anybody.
Just say Strava started bugging out near the top.
And I think stuff like that is good. I in my adult years, I've done a lot of climbs where I just looked at it. I just like, I have to get back at a certain time, so I'm gonna climb for 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and if I'm not at the top, I'm gonna turn around, and so I do that, and it's all good, In the past, I used to be sort of stuck in my brain. I'm like, oh, if you can't do the whole thing, then why bother? And I'm a yoga instructor, and it's nice to make the body flexible, but if you don't have mental flexibility, then you miss out on a lot of things, not just cycling things, but a lot of things in life, leads to suffering without a little bit of mental flexibility. Cyclists can not only be inflexible in their bodies, but sometimes a little bit tight in the brain.
Yes,
and
definitely.
and then be hard on themselves because of it. And it's like, for me, I mean, the sport's hard enough even when you're going for especially if you like riding in the mountains. Like I went for a ride this morning. I wasn't tracking it. I wasn't trying to set any personal gains, but I got a little climb behind my house that's gains about 300 meters, and it's steep at the top. And it's hard even when you go for a joyride, so you don't
Oh
need
yeah,
to beat yourself up on top of how hard the sport is already. I'm really interested in the joy of the
yeah.
experience, and I love tracking a ride, getting the PR and whatnot, but too much of that for me anyway, because I have a mathematical brain. I can get obsessed with the numbers, and then I'm like, oh wait, I'm losing the joy. I think I'm gonna ditch the devices for a couple months and then come back later. So have you had that experience much, or what?
I methodically record everything. Um, Not because I don't. I kind of feel like if I don't do it, then I kind of might forget about it, or I might
Mhm.
miss something um, that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. But like I said before, I don't overanalyze the data.
Yeah,
I like getting, especially on Strava. I focus on what I've done before.
yeah.
There's some people who will go out and say, "Oh, I want to, be KOM, whatever." Well, yeah, it's nice and it's great. Sometimes when you do get one, it's like, whoa, I did, even though there's only 8 people who've ever done that segment.
That's where those
Um,
dead-end roads are. It's a little easier
yeah, exactly.
to keep
Um,
up higher.
but to be honest, I much prefer just like, that recently, basically, we had a lockdown here in France and a second one, and you could only go a kilometre from your house. So I just did hill repeats of the hill that's at the bottom of my road, because that's just about a kilometre from where I live. And we were only allowed out for an hour as well. So I would go out for an hour, do hill repeats really hard because I wanted to do as much riding as possible. And I think it's given my legs a little bit of extra power because now when I go out, I seem to pick up a few more PRs on
There you
roads
go.
when I wasn't really expecting it. And whilst I don't live and die by those, it's nice to know that, oh, maybe I've got a little bit fitter, or maybe I've improved my technique, and
It's no, it's very exciting, and there's I have a climb that's about 5.5K right behind me, and I have a neighborhood with a bunch of hills that take about 3 or 4 minutes, um, right in the opposite direction. And since having our first child, I do a lot of I can do like you know 20K loop with that 5K climb, and I can go and do a half hour on those little walls. They're between 12 and 17%, so
wow.
it does the trick. So I just go and do 25 minutes over there, and I switched from doing more endurance riding to doing a lot of short riding, but with more intensity over the summer, and I was getting a lot of good PRs. But there was some times I came back from a ride and I swore I got a PR and I was 2 seconds slower. I was like, man, I suffered more. And maybe the tires
Yeah,
were a little low, or there was a little more wind, or it was 100 degrees, or 40 Celsius, as you would say. But then in my head, I'm like, oh no, I'm valuing this less. And when I get to that point where I feel great about the ride, I check the data and I value it less. I'm like, okay, next ride, no more. So
yeah,
I mean, I fully respect people who track everything. I think that's awesome, especially if you don't let it get to you. For me, I need to take a step back and then come back to it and get into it. If I go to a new place, though, I love to have it recorded, so that I can, when I'm missing travel or missing, new roads, I can go back and, take a look and relive the memories, which is pretty
yeah,
neat.
exactly.
Do you have any very specific, vivid memories that stick out that you've had on the bike, or maybe memories that really of moments where you really thought, man, this is for me, I'm hooked?
Um, I mean, I just sort of realised recently that the best rides are when it's a long ride. When you you basically set yourself up for that's your day. You're on the bike. You're not doing anything else. You haven't got to get home for a meeting or work or a family commitment, you just know that you've got on your bike and you're probably going to get home about tea time, and that's it.
There you go.
And when you have rides like that, and there's always a moment then where it's just, you look at the scenery, or you get to the next climb, or you get a descent, and you just think, oh, this is just the best place to be. I could do this all day, and you are doing it all day. It's brilliant.
There you go.
And I've done another thing I enjoy, which I don't get to do very often because it's quite difficult to arrange. Is I often ride across to my parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in a straight line. It's about 100 kilometers. So it's you can do between 130 and 150 kilometers depending on which road you take.
Yeah, for you, you can make like a point-to-point Tour de France type stage. Doing
exactly.
That. That's amazing.
And those kind of rides are great because it's not a loop. You can't ever say, well, you know what, I'll just cut this corner.
I'll take the short way.
You've got to get there. I mean, I've usually got backup and my wife coming in the car later on, but that's a bit embarrassing to have to say, I'm giving up. It's not because I'm mechanical, it's because I can't be bothered.
Let the air out of your tires and be like, double flat, sweetie. Yeah, it happens to the best of us. I think Greg LeMond did that in a race he did when he was feeling unfit, and he was not very proud of that. He's like, I let the air out of my tires and told the director I was going to quit. Did a big training ride the next day to make up for it. Yeah, there's so much history over there with the cycling. Although I feel when I'm there, I feel that history whether I'm on a road that's used in a race or not. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean the Tour is such a massive thing, and cycling in general. But I mean the Tour de France just kind of rises above everything else and everyone. We had it 3 years ago, two years ago. It came past the bottom of the village, and it was just a straight road. There's no challenge at all for the riders. It was near the start of one of the stages that ended up in the Pyrenees, and everyone in the village was down there. The whole road was packed, and it's just a flat bit of road in the middle of nowhere. And when I've been on the climbs for rides, it's just incredible. The atmosphere, and you see these riders and you see what they're doing, and then you think, yeah, I've done that. And it's, although you're not doing it as fast as them, you're not doing it as long as them, it's that kind of connection between this sport that's revered by so many, and it's so competitive and so difficult, but it's something that everyone can do. And I think that's what the best thing about cycling in a way. There's no kind of, well, you can't get into that stadium and play in that pitch because you're not on that team. You can always ride on the roads that they ride on.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Is you can go and you can go swing the bat in the arena, or that riding those climbs or doing a route that they do on a flat stage even, and it's a pretty cool thing. I like how versatile it is too. I used to play tennis, and you always needed a partner. And with cycling, you can go out with a partner. You can go out with 3 people. You can go out by yourself. You can go out with a big group. And
you can go out for half an hour, or you can go out all day.
Exactly. Yeah, there's great potential for both solo time and community, which I think are important to everyone, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Having time with friends, and then also your own special personal time. I mean, when I cycle by myself, I find that I see the scenery a lot more, even though the time goes by faster when I have a friend to chat with. Do you find that's the case for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, obviously this year's been a bit difficult. We haven't really been riding with anyone. But from my first book, I did make contact with a few people who, British people who live nearby. And going out with them was great. And it is, it's more of it's like going to the pub or going to a cafe, but you're riding your bike. You just go for a chat, really.
Yeah.
The thing I prefer about being by myself is the freedom to go wherever you want, to plan your route however you want, to change your mind, to go at the speed you want. So I mean, I'd say I definitely prefer riding alone, with maybe the odd group ride thrown in, rather than group rides with the odd sort of solo ride.
I'm exactly the same way, and I know some people rely on the community to get out for their motivation, and I I only understand that through observing it, not through the way I feel, but it makes sense because there's so many different types of people, and so people like sprinting and riding in the flats, people like riding in the hills all day. Some people like to do it all. There's great variety in desires and personality in the cycling community, and it's cool to check in with what people like.
Oh yeah.
I've always considered myself a climber, but I've lately been craving long distance rides that are more rolling or flat, and the mountains are fantastic, but some variety can lead you back to loving what you love the most, with
Oh
that
yeah.
whole absence makes the heart grow fonder sort of thing, and that's why I think places like where you live that have valleys and
Well,
hills
that's yeah. I
are
mean,
perfect.
people often ask what it's like cycling here, and and you've touched on it already, that here is where the actual place where I live is perfect, because you've got the hills to the south, you've got the Pyrenees further. If you can ride from here and go into the mountains if you do a kind of 100 150k ride, sort of 80 to 100 mile ride. And then if you go north, you've got the Montagne Noire, the Black Mountains, which are kind of a similar distance. And then in between, you've got this massive valley where you can ride flat if you want, or you can ride little hills, or it's so much choice. It's
Yeah,
great.
the Mountain Noir. I had a coach a long time ago, back when I was racing, who was a professional, and she rented a house there, and she was doing cyclocross races in Europe. She rented a house there to train a bit, and she says, "I want to buy a house there someday." She absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's
I
beautiful.
haven't checked that spot out, but that's on
Yeah,
that's on the ever growing list.
it's it's a I never heard of it before we moved out to France. I've been to France loads of times when I was a kid on holiday. I've been to this kind of region, but I'd never heard of the Black Mountains. And we went there for a walk just soon after we moved in, and it was, you can see the Pyrenees from the Montagne Noire. You can kind of see across the valley, and then the Pyrenees in the distance. But it's much more kind of like rolling hills. It's like basically like a kind of a lump, a massive lump in the countryside, rather than kind of the jagged peaks and valleys of the Pyrenees. And for cycling, the roads are huge, but there's just nothing on them. So you've got these really wide roads that you'd find kind of like, something like the Périsord or the Tourmalet, but no traffic at all, no cyclists, and it's covered in trees, and especially in fall, in autumn, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I know if people hear me talk about small roads, it may sound like I romanticize them, and I do like them quite a bit, but I like wide roads as well. The thing about small roads is they tend to be with less traffic, and a wide road
Yeah.
that's well paved with no traffic is even better, in my opinion. Um, what's the climate like in the area in the different seasons?
It's you can have a nice day any time of year. I mean, today, for example, I went for a ride this morning, and it was really cold, 1-2 degrees centigrade. I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit.
Just close
30,
to
40.
freezing. Yeah.
Um, and I was wearing a couple of layers, and I had my shoe covers on and thick gloves. And then I had an appointment in a town down the road this afternoon. I thought, you know what, I'll just take the bike because it's only like half an hour. And I rode there all dressed up again. And then I got back to the bike, and I was like, it's actually quite warm. So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when it was getting dark, it was sort of 12, 13 degrees, and I was
Yeah.
taking my gloves off, I was taking my shoe covers off, just wearing shorts. And the climate is so varied. I mean, generally in the summer, from kind of June through to the end of September, it's hot.
Hmm.
You know, you can get cold days, but it can be very hot. Even in September, it can be sort of, high
And
30s.
humid as well, right?
Yeah, but not as bad as in the not sort of sticky as in the UK. When it gets hot, it's really really uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
Um, but here, I kind of you can manage it better almost.
Yeah. Um,
And then obviously in winter you've got snow. Like the mountains now are covered in snow, and some of the higher passes have just been shut. And the lower ones you need special chains, so you wouldn't try it on a bike.
do you have a certain season that's your favorite, or a certain type of weather that's your favorite temperature to ride in or conditions to ride in?
I mean, also the best thing about the seasons is they do come around. So each time you're thinking, "Oh, I'm enjoying this," you've got something different and something new changing. It's not. I can't imagine living somewhere where it's just hot all the time, or it's just cold all the time, or it's just wet all the time. It would be awful.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that it changes. Every season does change, but I'd probably say autumn, sort of early autumn, end of September, October time. All the coals are open. The trees look beautiful. The countryside looks beautiful. There's nothing on the roads because all the tourist traffic's gone home.
There you go.
And like I said, you can get days where it's kind of 25, 30 degrees and it feels like it's summer still.
It's true. Last time I was in the Pyrenees was my birthday, September 23rd. We arrived in Barcelona, and then we went to Puigcerdà, and then we went to Andorra. I think I was in Andorra like 2 days before October, and it was baking. It was
Yeah.
very hot. And it got chilly at the top of the ski resort up at about 7,000 feet or over 2,000 meters. But
Yeah.
I was amazed. And California is like that as well. Very warm September and October, and it's a good time. It's a good time to get out there. Here it gets extremely dry, which sometimes leads to a lot of fires. But
Yeah.
it's interesting what dry means to one person. Like our hills look gold at the beginning of summer, and they look like dust in the Indian summer. So the weather's great. There's time to ride. There's the tourists are gone, but the hills look a little sad, like they're crying for rain. And that I
Yeah.
took a student on retreat from Switzerland to the Pyrenees, and she really liked it there. But I was like, "Look how green it is," and she says, "It seems a little dry." Switzerland
Yeah.
gets so much rain. So for what's lush for one person versus dry is you know depends on
Yeah,
your
and it depends.
your
It depends
background.
very much on the year as well, because we've had some years here where you get a very wet early summer, so it doesn't get nearly as dry by the end of the summer. And then some years where it's been dry from kind of April onwards, and by the time you get to August, everything looks, almost like sort of Southern California. It's
Yeah,
parched and dry, and all the grass is dead. And
yeah, it can be very very hot in the Pyrenees. I was there when it was nearly 40 degrees, and that was in June. And they said, "Oh
yeah,
yeah, it gets even hotter." And I was like, "Geez, like it feels like an oven." But then the weather can switch and rain, and I've had trips where it was in the 30s Celsius, and then it rained, and so one day you're overheating and the other day you're freezing. Um, so if people are watching this and they decide they want to go, definitely go
feel
and pack a
prepared.
rain bag
Yeah,
just in case.
yeah, and I mean the thing I've said as well in both the books about riding in the mountains is I kind of, when I wrote them, I kind of had sort of English people in mind, people from the UK. And in the UK, especially if you're from the south of the UK, you don't understand what mountains are like because there
Mhm.
aren't any. And I don't think people always appreciate that you can be riding in the valley, it can be 30 degrees, it can be lovely, and you can climb 1,000 meters, and all of a sudden it's pretty cold, and
Climb right
oh,
into
look,
the
there's a storm
clouds.
coming, or it's going to rain.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that we have gigantic mountains called the Sierra Nevadas,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they're drier. And I found that in the Pyrenees, I would sweat so much because of um, humidity, and then sometimes the clouds roll in and it gets windy. And even though it's hot in the valley, um, we'd cycle to 8,000 feet and not need any extra clothes in California most of the time. And I remember cycling up to like 5,500 feet in the Pyrenees and being very cold coming down the mountain. You don't typically see locals without their gilet or their whole shell or whatnot. They're prepared.
It's always quite entertaining though to see locals when it's especially kind of sort of turn of the seasons, like May, June time, and sort of October, November time. I go out in shorts and short sleeves, and French people think I'm absolutely crazy.
Oh, is that right?
They're all wearing like full, face masks, skin, nothing to do with COVID, just to keep the face warm.
Yeah.
And very rarely shorts as well. People often ride past me and say, "Oh, are you not really cold?" And I'm like, "No, I just wear shorts all the time. I'm just used to it." Warmer than it was in the UK.
Yeah, see, it depends on your temperament and where you come from, for sure. I remember a foreigner talking about living in Italy. He was saying they don't dress via temperature, they dress for the season. So if it's the fall, they cover their face, even if it's really nice out. He says they go up those climbs, they build up too much sweat. He says, I kept all my warm clothes in the back, just did a summer kit, and then put it all on at the top. I was really good. It's interesting, the different cultures, and then the fashion, like how fashion overlaps into cycling. I hear the Italians put on a lot of cologne before the races, which is so funny. No disrespect to the Italians. I love cycling in Italy and I love Italian culture, but the hair gel and the cologne is apparently not an uncommon thing. It seems a little redundant to me, but
yeah.
If you feel good about it, then why not?
Exactly.
Is there any places you've traveled to that you've really enjoyed cycling that stick out? Or, you're at a travel destination, so it's, there's so many options
it's
close by. But
in terms of traveling, I've been quite a few places around the world, but when I've had my bike, it's kind of just been locally. We went to the sort of middle of Catalonia on holiday a couple of years ago on the coast, just north of Barcelona, and that was wonderful to ride. But it was a lot busier. A lot of the roads had a lot more traffic because it's coast roads. And then I've been, I've ridden all over France and around most of the UK as well. But essentially, where I live is probably my favourite place to ride. But it's always nice to discover somewhere new. And there's plenty of places I'd love to take my bike, but I'm quite happy with, I just choose which direction I want to go in. Where haven't I been for a while? And it's like it's like going somewhere new anyway.
I rather like the food in Catalonia. Some really good tapas and local cuisine that they have there. It's nice to go and explore some, some things that are, different but the same. When we had our Pyrenees retreat in France, we would always drive to Bessos, which was the local Spanish town at what's the name of that? The port or the something that says door. That there's a
Portillon.
The Portillon, yeah. There's a Spanish side and a French side, and that the border is it says Val d'Aran. They're not super. They don't have a lot of Spanish pride. They prefer being Catalonian, right? But the border's right on the top of that climb. That was a cool spot. And I'm curious, have you ever made your way to the Cantabrian Mountains? And do people of the Pyrenees, on the map, if you look at it, it kind of just extends. It looks like one mountain range, but they're different names and there's different cultures. Have you been over there in Spain for any of those?
No. I've only ever ridden kind of this side of the Pyrenees, and this side in terms of the coast as well, sort of to the east, rather than I've never gone over to the Basque Country. But riding in Spain, the couple of times I've touched on rides in Spain. I'd definitely love to, explore more of it if possible in the future.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated with that mountain range as well. And part of that is the Angliru, the uber steep climb in Spain, and that's a very green part of Spain. It's interesting. They have like a lot of green meadows, but then there's also a lot of. It almost looks like the way heather looks like when it's dry. There's like this brown quality, and then the rock is a light colored, but it's more limestoney than there's a lot of granite in the Pyrenees. So it looks a lot like that, but it looks different. And I was just curious if people really distinctly feel like it's not the same, even though it looks like just one chain of mountains.
Well, I mean, the Basque Country is very, there's a big movement, isn't there to be, they're very proud of their heritage. They're very proud of the fact they're in a different part of Spain. It's not Spain for them. And the French Basque Country as well is the same.
Yeah,
So there's
and
definitely a culture there.
that's where the good surfing is too, right?
Yes, that's true.
I live in Santa Cruz. This is a surf town, but it's um, it's a great place to cycle. And my friends who have been to the Basque Country say, yeah, it's kind of like Santa Cruz, and big green mountains, little bit more lush, but really similar. Um, yeah, more places. One of the ladies I stayed with in the Pyrenees, she had a house in the French Basque, and she always told me, you must go," and I haven't yet gone, but it's on the list.
Yeah, it's on my list as well.
Very cool. And lastly, how do you feel? You take your son for rides on the back of your bike. Have I seen pictures of you with your
Yeah,
the bike seat and whatnot? How do you feel
yeah.
when you first became a father? Did you feel any different or feel a little scared to go ride? Or how do you feel riding as a father, just as an individual, and then also riding with your son with you?
In terms of riding by myself, it doesn't really enter into my head. I've always been very cautious in terms of traffic and stuff, and I kind of just think, if anything happens, it'll happen, but I'm as careful as I possibly can be. Um, when I ride with him, if I ride on the road, I'm much more kind of, I'm more aggressive, I think, towards other road users. If anyone dares come anywhere near me,
That's
I'll
it.
make them aware that, but generally, I plan. You don't really need to plan around here because everywhere's quiet, but I'll make sure I avoid main roads. And there's quite a lot of old railway lines that are quite nice.
Hmm.
Um, they're just a little bit boring to do more than once. So I kind of started off, I did all the old railway lines around about. And once I'd done them, I went back to one and I thought, I've just done this and it's just an out and back and it's flat. So I kind of sort of branched out and we started going on rides that were a bit hillier and a bit harder for me. But he doesn't care, he loves it. So
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like you just make some necessary adjustments to feel comfortable about it. And
yeah,
I get nervous about getting hurt from time to time. I've been in some major accidents and whatnot, but
really.
if you look at statistics, um, in America especially, like when you do cardiovascular activity, you're taking great care of your heart health as long as you don't overdo it. You're much more likely to die of a heart attack in America than have an accident that's fatal and whatnot. So
Exactly. Yeah.
touch some wood. But yeah, it's just nice. When I became an expecting father, even before we had our child, I was just like, okay, just if I feel nervous out on the road, I'll just use my brakes a little bit more. It's like when in doubt, just slow down. Don't let the fear conquer, your experience. And it's um, yeah, it's been a real joy to become a dad, and I like connecting with other people through fatherhood. And it's nice to I probably because all devices are all listening to us, but I see all these Jersey adverts for cycling dad, or world's best cycling dad, or cycling dad who loves beer, and I'm like, I'm all of those things. I should get that
That's
jersey.
all you'll be getting for Christmas.
Anyway, Nick, I would love to have you back on. I feel like we could talk for hours. And
Yeah,
further
definitely.
down the road, if you put out more books or if we come up with more topics to discuss, I need to say goodbye for now. But thank you so much for having a chat with us today. You've been a lovely, lovely guest.
You're
And
very welcome. It's
I
been
hope,
great talking.
yeah, I hope at some point in the future, maybe we'll meet in person and get out there for a ride.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Take care. Stay safe, everyone.